everybody would please take your seats. We have a quorum, and committee members, make sure if you come up you've got seats. If there's some members up here that are not committee members, then they will move. Those that are up here I've invited to sit up here, but if we need the space, we'll give it to them. With that, I'm going to ask my good friend, who's not on this committee, but he's here today, Representative Dominic Laricki, if you would, please start us with prayer, please. What number are you?
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. God, you are the creator and sustainer of everything. God, help us to be good stewards of all that you have given us and allow us to make decisions over. And just be with us during this time. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dominic. With that being said, I am now going to turn the meeting over to Chairman Burns.
Thank you, Chairman Roberts. I'm eternally indebted to you for letting me conduct these meetings. I can just assure you of that.
I wanted to show the
Thank you, and welcome to everyone that's here. See some familiar faces from back home. It's good to see a number of folks here. So we'll, I think we're in the posture of some of you who just came in. We certainly want committee members will be the folks who participate in this discussion today, and I think we certainly have adequate seating. So we've invited some folks who are not on the committee to join us, and that's fine. But we'll remind everyone that this will be a meeting will be conducted with committee members being able to ask questions of the presenter, Chairman Roberts. And he's a man who's good to his word. He's getting ready, I think, to present a bill at this time, Mr. Chairman, that he's told us all along that is a work in progress, that is taken a lot of folks' thoughts and recommendations into consideration, and they are part of this bill. And at this time, we would ask him to identify the piece of legislation he's working with, and we'll turn it over to him and let him present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're still waiting on a few more copies. How many members do not have a copy yet? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, the two of y'all share. We are was trying to get them all printed up, and just time-wise, we didn't have the chance to get them all ready just yet. But I want to talk a little bit in general, and then hopefully by that time we will have enough copies over here for you. I do apologize to you for not having those, but there was a minor adjustment, and it was just technical adjustment that needed to be made at the last minute, and so that's why we don't quite have them ready yet. But with that being said, first of all, let me thank each and every one of you. I think here comes the copies, especially the members of the committee, especially those this summer, the dean of our house, Representative Smyrie, Chairman Burns, Chairman Hamilton, and Chairman England, who is not here with us on this committee. But I want to, first of all, again, publicly thank you for your time and your service this summer. I know you spent a lot of time away from your families, traveling around the state of Georgia to 8 different locations around this state, anywhere from the northeast to the northwest to the southeast, to the middle part of the state, to the western part of the state, and all areas in between. During that time, we listened to each and every individual that wanted to come and attend those meetings, that wanted to speak. I can honestly say that there was not a meeting that we left without hearing from anybody and everybody that wanted to speak at those meetings. They were allowed to have a say, to tell us either what was good, what was bad, but at the end of the day, every voice that wanted to be heard at those meetings were heard. We were roughly within 2 hours of anybody in this state that wanted to attend, and I applaud those individuals and groups that showed up to attend, to have a conversation with us about what I believe is one of the more pressing issues that we're facing in the state of Georgia. If you got any extra copies, give the dean one. Anybody else that don't have a copy? Everybody got a copy now? All the transportation committee members?
All committee members have a copy. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. But with that being said, I do applaud the citizens and the groups that made an effort to be there. We heard a lot from individuals around the state about the need. There is no doubt in my mind that the need is here. To those who believe that there is not a need, then they have not looked at the data, have not looked at the information that was put out there. If they did, they would realize and understand that there's a need. Now, we can argue about where that need is, whether it's at $1 billion or wherever it goes to, wherever some might see it, but there is a definite need for more funding for transportation in this state. When you look at the deficient bridges that are around the state of Georgia, that you and I and our families and our children and all travel across every day, it's concerning. It's concerning to me, and I know it's concerning to you as well. When you look at the roads around the state, we still have good roads, but we do see the deterioration because we're not on a schedule. We're not on a schedule that we need to be on in 7-year plan. We're more on a 50-year plan, and to me that's unacceptable. So with that being said, we have worked throughout the summer, throughout the end of last year, and we developed a plan and put forth to the people and to the members of the General Assembly about what we found, and we presented that to you. I know each and every one of you have read it, and I appreciate you taking that opportunity. And through that, we have come up with several different drafts of this legislation. But as we stated at the beginning, this was always a work in progress. We knew it was going to be a work in progress, and we've tried to listen to any and everybody that wanted to come in and sit down. I know that some may not have been able to get in to see me. I apologize for that. But it has been a revolving door there in my office for any and everybody that wanted to get in. So we've tried to work everybody in. And to those that were not able to get in, I do apologize. But I know that you've been able to talk to other members of the body and of this committee. So with that being said, I know you've got the bill there in front of you now. LC 344519S is the bill that we're going to be working off of today. And do you have a copy? Okay. No, you're okay. I just wanted to make sure. We were late getting enough copies over here, so I just wanted to make sure you had a copy as well. With the bill, we have made some changes. We have heard from government officials that are concerned about what we were doing in the last piece of legislation. And as we've continued to evolve, we've tried to address a lot of those concerns. I think in this legislation, hopefully we've gotten to the point where we've addressed a lot of the concerns. Now, I will be the first to tell you we're not going to make everybody 100% happy. We never really set out to make everybody 100% happy. If we did, then I'm worried that we've done something wrong. There's always going to be a little discomfort pretty much in every piece of legislation that we do when it comes to this magnitude. But again, this is a process. As we move through this committee, if we move it through the House, as it gets over to the Senate, I'm sure they've got their ideas and there's some changes that will be made, and the process will continue, and we'll end up working this out in the end. But with that being said, I'm going to basically kind of, like I did the other day, kind of go through the bill, but there's not a lot of changes in this bill except for really 3 major changes. But I do want to talk about one change that we've made, and that goes back to the point to where we talk about in the other bill where we talked about the dedication of the fee for the $200 and $300 for the AFV fee, alternative vehicle fee. You know, in that, I knew all along that what we were doing there was trying to show language where our intent was to use that money toward transit. But some have misconstrued that, and there was even Mr. Neil Herring the other day that testified to the fact that what was in there, the language was unconstitutional. So we have removed that language. If anybody was complaining or concerned about, well, it's unconstitutional because that language was there and we can't dedicate because it wasn't by a constitutional amendment, that is now resolved. That is not in there anymore. We never meant that it was to be dedicated. We realize and understand what the Constitution said. We were just trying to put suggested language in there. But with those individuals that felt like that we were being unconstitutional by doing that, we have resolved that issue in this copy. So as we move on through, we go to, go to part 3, where we talk about the governor's powers again, which that part has not changed since the other day. Part 4 is where we remove the tax credit for electric vehicles. We're removing that. As we move over to 4-2 in the bill, that's where we remove the prepaid sales tax or state tax portion of it. 4-3 is exempts motor fuels from the state sales tax, because we're just going through making those changes because we're going to excise tax. And that's kind of, if you look at the next several sessions, you'll see where that's really what we're doing. We're going in and excluding that part of it. When you get over to 4-7, this is where the bill starts to change. And it's going to be outlined over the next couple of sessions, dealing with lost, host, or the next 2 sections. And what we've done in these 2 sections is we're now taking that to 1.25%. Instead of 1%, let me move that around and make sure you get comfortable there with that mic. We're taking it to 1.25%, and we're not allowing it to be charged on motor fuel. And some say, well, why are you doing that? We're still going by what we believe is that the sales tax or tax charged on motor fuel should be dedicated toward transportation. Lost is a dollar for dollar rollback on property taxes. And so with us taking it off of motor fuel, we're going to a 1.25%, allowing that to help to recoup the revenue that they're not going to be receiving off of motor fuel. And we do that with host as well in Section 8. And then Section 4-9 is where the transportation purposes definition is. And if you'll read this part of the bill, we go through and I'm going to skip over a little bit, because as we talk about this section, I need to talk about what we do on further into the bill. We're going to take spliced and e-spliced, leave them alone. We're leaving them alone. I mean, we've heard that from an e-splice standpoint, from the education standpoint, we've listened to their concerns. Bottom line is e-splice and splice mirrors each other. So you can't do the one without doing to the other. So we sat back and said, listen, we're going to leave them alone. We're going to allow them to finish out where they currently are today. And when they expire, if the citizens so choose to go back in and vote back in that splice or that e-splice, then the money collected off motor fuel will go toward transportation purposes. So with that, you will see in this section where we talk about the transportation purposes. We talk about, from the education standpoint, the transportation purposes. And that definition has to vary a little bit because of the fact that the E-SPLOST, as it is within the Constitution. So if you look at those two, you will see the definition. The definition for transportation purposes, it has not changed. And then we added in B on line 294, which talks about the education portion of it as far as for transportation purposes. I'll also be remiss if I don't talk about line 282, which talks about level 1 countywide projects for transportation purposes is in that as well. As we move on over, we continue to go through, and each one of those of these sections as we move through kind of talks about transportation purposes. We talk about exempting the motor fuel. We talk about, and I know that y'all right now are trying to read it as we go through, so I'm trying to give you an opportunity to read. And I'm actually, to be honest with you, I'm trying to make sure mine correlates with the new sub, the one that I had marked up. So with that, you go down to, and we talk about most in here, doing the same thing, going to 1.25 on it as well. Let's go, let me get back to the point where I can get y'all to follow along. 4 dash, make sure I'm correlating. 4-13 is the E-SPLOST. 4 dash, and that's where it goes in, and 414 talks about most. 415 goes to the 29.2 and the 33 and the indexing portion, which hadn't changed from the other day. Guys, I apologize with y'all as well. I'm making sure that what I'm telling you corresponds with the copies I've got, because I forgot 2 or 3 copies in my folder as well, so I apologize for that to you. So they just come hot off the press. 4-16 is where we remove the repeal of the second motor fuel. Section 5.1 deals with the Georgia Infrastructure or Transportation Infrastructure Bank. So I will I'm going to give you, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, you want to give them a minute or two and kind of let them kind of go through themselves.
I think that'd be appropriate. Let's stand at ease for a moment.
I mean, I know a lot of you've just gotten this, so I want to give you a chance to digest it as well as you're looking through it.
Chairman, will you clarify something for me?
Yes, sir.
How about clarify your 1.25 and your 1% local?
Okay,
pieces?
1.25, we're allowing that, and that goes into effect on July the 1st for lost, host, and most, and e-lost. Those will take effect July 1. We'll go to 1.25, and they will no longer be collecting that on motor fuel. And that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Your SPLOST and your
SPLOST and E-SPLOST will continue until such time as they expire. At such time as they expire, if they are reauthorized by the voters, then the voters then will understand and know that the part that is collected on motor fuel will be spent for transportation. There's one other thing that I failed to talk about that was in the last bill concerning this bill. There is no longer a 6-cent excise tax from the local governments. That has been removed. So here's basically what we're allowing in a nutshell. I'll summarize it back for you again. E-splost and splost, they can continue to collect it until such time as it expires. If the voters choose to reauthorize it, they can reauthorize it. And if they do, then according to here, you will see in here the definition that they have to use it for transportation purposes, the amount that they collect off motor fuel. And then when it comes to lost, e-lost, most, host, we go to 1.25%, and they will not collect it on motor fuel. And the locals don't have the opportunity to add the 6 cents. Those are the changes, the substantial changes that have been made within this piece of legislation. As I said, this has always been an ongoing process. This has been something that we've continued to work on. I am sure as it moves through the process, there will be other changes made to it along the way. And in the end, hopefully, we can come together, the House and the Senate, and bring forth a piece of legislation that gives us some sustainability for the future of transportation here in the state of Georgia. You know, the indexing piece is important. That actually gives us some stability and long-term solution to part of our problem. No longer are we going to be sitting here we have to go from one 6-month period to the next 6-month period and take that average and figure. We will know what it's going to be at the pump. It works off of CAFE standards, it works off of consumer price index, construction price index, and those are things that we believe directly affects transportation as we move forward. When you look at it from the standpoint today, the average miles per gallon that a vehicle gets in the state of Georgia is 21. I think by year 2020, and I could be wrong if I'm not exact on that, they're going to, the manufacturers are going to have to go to 40 miles per hour average for their fleet. Now that doesn't mean that the F-150 truck that I drive has got to get 40 miles per gallon. I wish it did. Make it a lot better on me. But that means that their fleet has to average 40 miles per gallon. Well, as that continues to increase over time, we will have this in place, this part of the index that will help to bring that up. The other part from the construction price index is how much a dollar will buy. I mean, the last time we updated this was 1971. We've heard the amount of miles that we could pave then compared to today. And we have done ourselves an injustice by not going back and updating this until now. If we don't move forward and believe that transportation is important in this state, we're going to send the wrong message. Other states around us, other states throughout the U.S. are facing the exact same issues that we're facing. They've either addressed them or they are addressing them. We're not by ourselves. But I can tell you that investment is what's going to help us continue to sell the state of Georgia from an economic development standpoint. We need to make sure that when we bring in business and industry, that they will be able to get that product from point A to point B, or that their employees will be able to get to and from work without having to sit in traffic for an extra hour, hour and a half a day. We've got to continue to move toward that. We don't want our infrastructure to continue to crumble. And that's where we're going in this state of Georgia if we don't do something. Y'all have heard me talk about traveling throughout the U.S., and I can tell you that investment's being made. States right around us today, South Carolina is considering a big increase on their motor fuel because they've got the same issue that we've got. They've actually went in and took a lot of county roads and put them on the state highway system, and now they're having the issues that we have. How do we fund this? How do we take care of this as we move forward? With that, I will, at this time, be glad to take any questions from the committee that anybody might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was an excellent job of going through the bill again and explaining the changes that have been made. We appreciate the thorough explanation and your and certainly your thoughts. To give the members just a second to finish looking, I know looking at the changes. I know we have a couple of folks who want to speak. I want to recognize many of our DOT board members that are in attendance today. Glad to have y'all. You're always welcome here, and certainly Senator Gooch, who's been a big part of this whole discussion. Good to have you with us. Now, our posture here is that we've had about 6 hours of hearing time, as we've heard from the chairman on the bill and from other folks that have been interested in the bill. So today, this will be a time for questions from members only as we move through this process. So at this time, I will entertain a question from Chairman Reinders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my friend and Chairman Roberts, thank you so much for what I know sometimes seems like a thankless job, but I appreciate you doing the heavy lifting. Just a couple quick questions. There were some issues that were brought up previously about paved versus unpaved. Where are we at on that issue?
We have not changed it.
All right, thank you for that. And the other's a kind of a technical question on line 292. We've got revenue debt. Now, my understanding is, as limited as it may be, that when we sell revenue bonds, the purpose of those bonds are to be paid for by infrastructure that we're putting out, like a toll road or utility line, and that the money that line or that toll brings in pays this off. My concern here, when I see the revenue debt, my concern is, are we obligating, since this is a SPLOST, are we saying that they can use revenue debt to pay off a revenue bond, even given the fact that the SPLOST may not be reapproved by the voters?
This language is in there. Well, I'm going to answer it. I'm going both ways. One, we put this language in there because Chairman Hamilton and them in Forsyth County had the foresight to step out and step up and pass. It's a $200 million, is that correct, Chairman Hamilton? $200 million locally. They passed it for a transportation project. They stepped up to the plate. So to make sure that they were allowed to take the money from this on motor fuel and be able to go back and pay bonds, then that's why we put it in here. To answer your question, I don't think that we're stepping out. I think that we're going to, under this definition, we're okay.
I just don't want any of us to be accused if someone did
Sure.
renew something and say we're on the hook for 10-year bonds or 20-year bonds that are not producing revenue. And because that's the definition. General obligation I get, but we've got systems that try to sell revenue bonds that don't produce revenue.
That's correct. And if the county or the city chooses to go out and sell a revenue bond without being able to make sure that they're going to pass this next one, then they're going to have problems and issues with it. I think this really gets at the heart of addressing more of Chairman Hamilton's issue, but I understand where you're coming from as well.
Can I ask Chairman Hamilton a question?
That's fine.
Chairman Hamilton, would what you're trying to accomplish in Forsyth, would the word revenue debt affect that?
On the advice of counsel, no. What?
Oh, well, then I'd believe him.
No, what I did was in talking with legislative counsel, we went out and sought counsel at our local, looking at the bond that we presently have set up there, or that we're moving forward with this, because this was an encouragement. I mean, we're getting ready to expand Georgia 400 up further than they ever dreamed of starting this year. I mean, because the local community took this forward. What we wanted to do was, because it's a bond to sales, I mean, to property tax owners. With this, we said, should the county want to pay those with this, it turns it more into a SPLOST related or consumer. So we did it. And our county attorney came up with language that would satisfy that particular bond. And then ACCG got involved and said, okay, that takes care of your particular issue, but what do we want to do so that in the future, if other counties want to do that? And so, not being a learned attorney, what I would say is the language that we have here was then got with legislative counsel, and he agreed that that would encompass what we were trying to do. And that was really the purpose, was it. So, yes, it was specific to Forsyth County because Forsyth County has done that, but we also, I think that there's communities around this state that might want to do a similar thing where they want to go ahead and because when you have local dollars, you can make things happen so much quicker than relying on other state or especially federal opportunities. So that was the purpose of the language.
And finally, Mr. Chairman, my only point is I don't know how easy it is to sell a bond if you're not guaranteed you got a mechanism to pay it back.
Correct. These are general obligation bonds that we have up there. They're not revenue bonds.
Thank you for your help, Chairman Hamilton. Chairman Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Roberts, I have one question. It deals with the school systems.
Yes, sir.
I want to make sure that I'm clear on this. We're going to allow the local governments to, when they go back to vote on these SPLOST, we're going to allow them to collect 1.25.
On SPLOST and eSPLOST, 1%. Only on LOST, eLOST, HOST, and MOST goes to 1.25. We can't go up on eLOST. The Constitution says up to 1%, so you can't increase it.
Okay. But they can go back and add with the voters to the fuel for transportation purposes.
That's correct.
And those items that could be spent on transportation purposes for schools would literally just be buses.
Well, if you read here, it says transportation necessary to move students to and from educational facilities in this state and all accompanying infrastructure and services necessary to provide safe and efficient access. So more than just school buses.
All right. Could you give me an example of something else besides school buses in that definition?
School bus shops that they have.
All right.
They can buy the parts and all for the buses. They can, and even when it says services, anything that comes under services from the standpoint of running the bus shop to paying of the bus drivers to that type of thing, according to this definition, would be underneath that.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Gardner. Excuse me, Representative Gardner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and to the chairman of the committee, thank you for spending time with me and answering many of my concerns. And I have still two that are lingering.
Okay.
Would you look at line 372 and explain to me exactly what it means with regard to the municipal option sales tax, which applies only to the city of Atlanta, as I understand it?
Let me get to
Page 12, I think.
Yeah, I've got to get to my other sections as well. I'm sorry.
372?
On the most?
Yeah.
Dealing with the most. Where you see the except for diesel fuel,
Right.
that's the situation that we're trying to address with the Motor Truckers Association, saying by allowing the locals to charge that on diesel fuel that it was actually hurting them more. So this way it would actually, they would be able to go in and use that and get that reduction or that credit from their income tax. That's what you see, the except, and you'll see that throughout the bill.
Okay. My concern is that a tax that's passed in my city specifically for waters and sewers is going to have taxes attributed to motor fuels or not?
They will not.
Okay.
They will not collect it on motor fuel anymore. Okay. That's why it's going to the 1.25.
Well, thank you for fixing that little piece.
Yes, ma'am.
Second piece, of course, is a huge issue about transit.
Sure.
I mean, as much as I trust your openness and willingness to talk about transit and ensure me that there are likely to be bonds in the final budget for transit, and I'm very excited that transit has finally found its day in the sunshine in this state, and I thank you for that. It's hard when you don't see it.
I understand. And if I could have put in this bill and showed that there was a $100 million bond sitting there for transit, I would have. Unfortunately, I can't do it in this piece of legislation. So,
do you suppose there will be timing that will allow me to vote on this bill, since nobody thinks transportation funding is more important than I do?
Sure.
I don't think.
And I agree with you on that. I do understand that you're actually one that really and truly believes in it as well as I do.
We desperately need to do this.
I can't tell you when the budget's coming to the floor.
I know. I wish you could.
I wish I could. I wish I could, but I can't at this point. And furthermore, I can't tell you when this bill is coming to the floor.
Or what it's going to look like, I bet.
Well, if it comes out of this committee, then
you know what it's going to look like.
we're going to pretty much know what it looks like for us.
All right.
If we get it out of the floor, after we get it out of the House, there's no telling what it may look like when it comes back from the Senate. But that's okay. That's the beautiful part about this process. The Senate claims they try to perfect our bills, and we claim we try to perfect theirs. But at the end of the day, it is a work in progress, and that's what makes the place good. I mean,
I'll be there April 2nd. I know you will too.
Yeah, I will. Yes, ma'am, I will.
I want to thank you for taking on this huge project.
Well, I thank you, and I thank you for your help too.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been trying very hard to counsel the gentleman to my right, sometimes to no avail, but it's a work in progress. Let me say that, as we've gone through this process, and it has been extremely interesting, and certainly I've always had respect for you, Mr. Chairman, but it has increased with your willingness to try and reach a point that this is as close to try and be inclusive as you could get. Yes. I think the committee did yeoman's work during the fall, summer and fall as they worked, and I expressed my reservations when it came out of subcommittee. And in conversation with you and looking, I've seen some areas addressed that I felt very, very strongly about. I do share Representative Gardner's concerns about the transit piece, and I certainly empathize. I think that to go back as you have, and you've addressed some problems that the cities have had and some problems the counties have had, and these were not addressed when we came out of subcommittee, and I appreciate that, and certainly the Board of Education. This has been very important. It's extremely important to me. We have a growing school system in my district, and certainly I didn't want to do anything that would impede this group or make it more difficult than it already is. With that being said, I certainly want to thank you for your diligence and your inclusiveness. It has. I got a little concerned when I got here about 10 minutes to 3. Nobody. 5 minutes after 3, I wondered, had I got in the wrong room and you were meeting without me.
No, sir.
And then when I saw the dean come in, I figured that maybe you all were coming anyhow. But I appreciate your work. I've certainly, I've talked with my people. I have been talking with them nonstop. Because when it's all said and done, as much as I love OCILLA, there ain't a soul in OCILLA that can send me back.
I don't know. You got some people that may move down there.
Well, we certainly got our doors open.
That's right.
But I appreciate the effort, and I think the effort has been worthwhile, and we certainly thank you. I feel a lot better at this full committee meeting than I did previously, but that's part of the process.
Sure.
The process works, and I'm trying. I told you at the subcommittee, or at least I addressed the committee, that I was looking for a way to support this bill, not a way to be against it.
Sure.
And I think that there has been some good effort made to make this, even though it's still a work in process in some place, a workable plan. I live close to Savannah. I have to see all those trucks coming in and out of there. And I get to now hit too many potholes that I'm not used to hitting in Georgia.
Yes, sir.
And I'm hoping, I know transportation is vital. We can't continue to grow as a state if we don't address our transportation issues, and that's all of them. So certainly, I feel good about this. I hope I'm going to feel better later on, but I feel good. I feel good enough to at least walk around and smile. And thank you for your work. Thank subcommittee. Thank Chairman Burns. I wasn't sure how I was going to work with him when you appointed me to the subcommittee. It worked out good. He's been good chairman, and we thank you. Thank all the members, everyone that's been involved in this process for the mighty work that's been done.
Thank you. And I appreciate you as well, and I appreciate your input and your concerns. I was a little late because we had to go make sure that former Representative Jay Shaw was reelected to our DOT board. So we had to go.
But did he make it?
He did. He did. He's done so well. Nobody even challenged him, or either nobody else wanted to deal with it, I guess you'd say. But
that might be it.
Could very well be it. It's kind of like us sometimes. I think sometimes nobody else wants the job, you know. But anyway.
All right, you boys gonna talk this thing to death. We need to move on.
We're trying to come together in a bipartisan manner.
Sometimes it takes a while to make sauce.
That's right. That's right.
Representative Williams, you're right. It's important to all our people, but an area you represent is important to the security of our country. And transportation is very, very important there. So thank you for your comments. Chairman Setzler.
Thank you, Chairman Burns. To the chairman, author of the bill, I appreciate your open door policy. I've probably spent more time with you working through this than just about anything we worked on the last several years. Sure. For members of the committee, I had offered for review of the committee last meeting an amendment that dealt with transit. Mr. Chairman, forgive me for not getting an updated version before now to staff. I do have a version that's been updated that I'm going to offer here. It's got the right line numbers adjusted. But again, the purpose being that to provide the same level of confidence for fixed guideway transit, rail and the like, outside of the MARTA counties of Fulton, DeKalb, and Clayton, that if funding at the local or state level is going to fund transit, not intercity, but rail transit, that there be a referendum vote of the county, just like we had in the MARTA counties, to provide the level of legitimacy behind that program, which beyond just a project is a multi-year commitment to a long-term operational subsidy for the county. I think that again provides legitimacy and some backstop to what you're doing here, that because we do have the broad purposes, and many people do, like Representative Gardner, support the option of transit, that we have the people support beyond just the vote of a commission. So I'm going to offer that at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Okay.
Chairman Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I'd just like to thank you also for all the accommodations you've tried to make. And one, I just want to bring everybody's attention to that we did make a slight change. And if you'll turn to the last page of page 17, dealing with the infrastructure bank, we split that up so that on loans, we're giving preference to Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties, but we've also added in there preference for grants and other financial assistance may be given to eligible projects which have local financial support, because I think, once again, sometimes we rely too much on GDOT, other times, and since you brought up a while ago, not to tout my county per se, but since we stepped up for that $200 million, I think this also provides that on some of those grant opportunities, if communities are willing to put financial skin in the game, then there's a reward for that. And I appreciate the openness, and I want to make the committee members aware that that's in there also. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. And thank you again. Your county is one of the shining examples that we all need to look to, and we appreciate them for what they've done.
Any other questions? from any members? Oh, boy, that got you going. Representative Waits.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you again for the legislation. Again, I also applaud the efforts. I had a question. I believe we also have a unique opportunity to help more Georgia small business owners. And for that reason, I'd like to offer a friendly amendment that requires all bids that exceed $100 million or where the cost projected is $100 million to identify within the bid a minority business participation plan, something very similar to what the federal government already does. And so there's no number, there's no percentage, but instead, along with the bid, there's a plan of action to identify small business owners or women business owners that may wish to do business with the state.
Have you prepared anything in writing on that amendment?
I'm going to use the exact same language that mirrors the federal government.
Okay, we'll be taking up amendments.
Thank you,
just
sir.
a minute, and you can be very explicit, and then we'll ask for
Thank you.
input from the committee. Thank you, Representative. Chairman Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this bill forward. I do want to comment just a little bit, since you have given such praise to one of our other chairmen up there. I do want to mention to you that several regions passed the TIA's blast. We recognized how important transportation is and how important the funding for the transportation is. So I just kind of wanted you to, recognize the fact that the regions that passed it stepped up and did what we could do to make this a beginning. And I know this bill has taken many weeks, months, and has gone through a lot of changes. And I applaud you for what you've done.
Thank you.
And at the same time, I would like you to applaud us for what we did. So if you feel led to give a little bit of cheer to those of us who did pass TIA, I would certainly appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. Madam Chairwoman, I have repeatedly, and I apologize that I have not said anything here today, but I have repeatedly talked about the three regions that did step up. They stepped up. They are doing an outstanding job, and I think if you go and talk to these locals in the three regions, they will tell you that it is a success story, that they are doing more now than they've ever been able to do with transportation. Even counties that didn't vote for it within there that was in those regions, I've heard them even say that they're glad that it passed because of all the things that it's being able to do for them. And they're doing a lot of good things and a lot of projects. In fact, probably most all the projects being done right now are being done in those regions, really around the state, more there than anywhere because of that local commitment. And we do appreciate that. And again, I do applaud y'all and applaud that region, all three of those regions for that. And I apologize for slighting y'all.
Thank you very kindly.
Yes, ma'am.
You'll know better next time.
I know. See, Mark got me in trouble.
Any final questions? Okay. Our posture this time is that we are considering a substitute to House Bill 170. It's on it should be before you, everyone. LC 344519S. And the chair would be open to a motion at this time. Motion from Representative Epps do pass. Do I hear a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. This time we will now entertain amendments, and we'll start with Chairman Setzler. 16,
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got AM 340671. It's being passed out now by staff. it was drafted for the old LLC version. I've made the pen and ink changes for you just to the line number so it applies to this substitute. So I'll let that get passed out and I'll explain it, Mr. Chairman.
I think that's appropriate.
It's the exact amendment I offered last time.
Does everyone have a copy of AM 340671?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the same amendment I offered for review in our last full committee meeting. What it simply does is it just adds on to Chairman Hamilton's language, and he made a modification to transportation purposes in subcommittee. Transportation purposes on lines 288 through 293 are not changed in any way by this amendment. This amendment simply adds on that if any dollars are spent on fixed guideway transit, then there's got to be a referendum vote to make that, to execute that. So if a county wants to commit county SPLOST dollars for, and again, fixed guideway transits does not include, if Amtrak runs through your district, and that's intercity rail. That's not what this talks about. This deals with transit specifically. Fixed guideway meaning along a fixed alignment. It's heavy rail, light rail, bus rapid transit that's tied to a fixed alignment that's immovable. Again, the purpose being most of us have transit in our districts in the form of bus services. It doesn't affect those in any way, shape, or form. You could triple the number of buses, and this doesn't affect you and your district at all. What this recognizes, though, is when you invest capital in a fixed guideway, you're set with that alignment. It's never changeable. It becomes a thing when you put hundreds of millions, in some cases $1 billion in a project, you can't undo that project. It becomes something there's a permanent long-term commitment to fund. For example, federal dollars. When federal dollars go to fixed guideway transit, there's got to be a local commitment for 20 years of funding at a minimum for dollars to move towards that project, because there's got to be an operational subsidy to support and subsidize the fare box over time. Okay? That's what this recognizes, that just like when we issue general obligation bonds, we require that to go before a vote of the people, because it's not just a 4-year commitment by a county commissioner or by a city. It's a 20-year commitment that binds further entities to provide funding. That's why I'm offering this, because it's consistent with the way we offer GO bonds. It's consistent with the way MARTA was created by a vote of the respective counties that could be affected. It's consistent with the one metro county that I represent, Cobb. Our leadership said if we're going to do fixed guideway transit, we're going to put it before a vote of the people. And I think it makes sure you've got buy-in for obligations that bind beyond what a single commission or elected body could bind. We don't allow there to be multi-year obligations for budgeting purposes, because you can't bind a future commission. This recognizes that same principle and just simply puts it, ensure there's a referendum vote before those kinds of projects are executed. Be glad to take questions, Mr.
Good
Chairman.
explanation. We'll offer the first question to Chairman Roberts if he has a question. If not, we'll open it to the committee members.
Open it up. Open, Mr. Chairman. I'm good.
Thank you. Chairman Reinders.
Thank you so much, and thank you for bringing the bill or the amendment. We talked about this last time, Chairman Seltzer, and I just want to make sure that there's nothing that allows one governing authority, and I want to ask you about that definition as well, that allows one governing authority to have jurisdiction over another. Are you telling me that that wouldn't happen with this amendment?
What this does is simply requires that if fixed guideway is going to be built in a specific county, that county's voters have to have a county-wide referendum to do it.
Okay, we talked about this outside a couple days ago. Is my concern addressed?
Could you restate your concern to me, Chairman Reinders?
I'll take that as a no. I'll take that as a no.
Well, I think Chairman Reinders' concern, now, I guess to summarize, tell me if I'm wrong, is if your county is, say there's a metro area, and your county is 2 counties away from the core.
Or the next county.
Or if if you wanted to tie into to the urban core, and there was a county between you and the urban core, and there's no way for you to go around that county, for you to have transit that connected through that county gets to vote. So no, you could not, your county could not force transit through another county against their vote.
You did a great job of understanding what I meant.
Yes, sir.
And I want to ask you on the authority question, if you look at subsection A, and then there's a great definition: any authority created by law, any agency, any other political subdivision. And then in B, you have whenever the governing authority, and I'm just wondering how that's created.
Be glad
and
to
if you
speak.
feel comfortable with that, and then one more following that, if I may.
Could you speak the line number and the words you're talking about, Chairman Randers?
Well, I'm talking about if you look at line 23, the governing authority of such county, any authority created by law, any agency, any other political subdivision, special district. It seems fairly broad, and I didn't know if there's, and I just wanted you to help me understand on line 30, whenever the governing authority, is that governing authority the same as the above mentioned?
Yeah.
Any of those would apply?
I'll speak to that in detail. Thank you for the question. First question, which deals with a laundry list of entities. The governing authority of any such county, that's a county commission. Okay. Any authority created by law. If you've got a downtown development authority that's going to participate from a revenue bond perspective, there's a lot of ways to structure the financing of these. You know, when you talk about authorities being used, a development authority, for example, that could be used to issue bonds for a project, a P3 project. What I want to make sure we're clear of is if the voters think there's a requirement for the vote of the people, that's in fact the case. That if we bind a governing authority, a county commission or a city, we're also ensuring that they can't route something through a development authority and get around what would otherwise be required by law. So I'm going to be very clear. It's the governing authority, the elected governing authority. It would be a development authority, projects financed that way. It would include any agency, the DOT. The DOT couldn't teleport or send in fixed guideway transit to your county without there being a vote of your people. That's agency. Or any other political subdivision, which means a city. Special district, a community improvement district. CIDs, if they created funds and wanted to pull down federal dollars and bring transit into a county, again, we're very clear. If it's going to be in a county, you get a vote of the people. Okay. And lastly, instrumentality of the state. We listed that as well. You talk about special taxing districts. The TIA regions were special taxing districts under Georgia law. Some folks have opined that CIDs are instrumentalities of the state, but not political subdivisions. So I want to make sure that the instrumentality of the state, similar to an agency, includes things that bonds are sourced through. I want to make sure that's covered there for voters so that they know there's kind of proof in advertising. Line 30, separate issue, is when the governing authority submits before the electors, it is the governing authority of that county that puts it before the electors. You're not going to have an agency that puts it before them. That's correct. It's
okay.
The governing authority of the county that would put it before the voters.
Thank you for clearing that up. And finally, line 54. Why would you choose to use the word may as opposed to the word shall?
Once the votes happen, I want to explain to folks, the county commission decides when the vote happens and the manner in which it happens. Once that happens, a future expansion, anything that affects the funding level, that legislative delegations through local legislation may influence that, but there's no requirement for them to do that. If this said shall, it would require local legislators to be involved in that process. I don't want to force them to do that. I want to allow counties the opportunity to kind of manage this. However,
why even mention it at all then?
Because I do believe, if you think about it, if you've got a county that invites local rail into the county that moves in 2 miles, and there's a desire to expand it and run 20 more miles at a period down the road, I want to be very clear. If the voters think they're voting on 2 miles of a light rail system or a trolley system, and they vote yes, we want fixed guideway transit. If it's going to be dramatically expanded, say 10x, local legislators would have the ability by local law to control that and affect that, but there's no requirement for them to do that.
Finally, this is my last follow-up, and here's my thinking. I know you wouldn't want a local delegation to say, you know, I may approve it if this, and this contract happens.
Mr. Randers, I can tell you.
That's the concern I have, not from you or anybody else, but just having that piece in there gives a lot of leeway in negotiating some of the things you're talking about.
Well, there's two things. There was a very careful balance that we tried to strike here. The idea of requiring a local act to enable this to come into the county was considered. I didn't think it was appropriate. I do think I wanted the counties to have the ability to put this before their voters themselves. Some could say that the same thing would apply to counties. If there's zero accountability to even county officials, the idea that the voters would have voted to expand something marginally and then it's going to be expanded, you know, a $1.5 billion project can be expanded 10 or 12 years later. There needs to be, in my mind, some ability for local legislators, if there's a need, to influence that. So it's not just one official by themselves, but there's the ability to have accountability without having to bring a general act before the General Assembly. And again, I think the goal is that you've got shared accountability as opposed to single point accountability.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I needed a clarification on this because what I've run into when I'm looking at your discussion of your amendment is, and I understand the voters' participation very important, but I was just thinking about what Representative Sims was saying. You know, there were a whole lot of regions who are not able to say we have what we have, and if we'd have followed Representative Sims's reason, we wouldn't be sitting here today with this. And we vote every year to obligate hundreds of millions of dollars in bonds, and we do it, and we don't ask the voters to approve it except every 2 years whether they decide to send us back or not. And they get a bite of the apple. I'm just wondering, and help me with this part. Is it not true that 40 plus years ago, if we'd have voted for rapid transit, we wouldn't have these buses because we would have it now. And in our voters' wisdom, we got gridlock 45 years later. I'm just wondering how we're getting ready to do $1.6 billion now because they sent us here to make the decision. I felt like we should have made 3 years ago, like we're doing right now, instead of kicking the can down the road, but that's another day. But we're getting ready to do that now, and we are not asking for a vote because they sent us to vote for it. And those that think that we voted wrong, well, I'll have new faces to look at in 2 years. They get the ultimate say. Tell me about that.
I appreciate the question, Representative Williams. It's very important to understand the distinction between us as legislators and local governments. Local governments have legislative and executive authority vested in one body. Okay, we've got separatist powers. We have a House. We have a Senate. We've got a governor that reviews and signs bills. It was recognized as important when MARTA was passed in brought in place in the 1960s and 70s, that there be a vote of the counties to participate. When you look at fixed guideway transit, even the best transit systems in the country, the day in, day out operations of those trains are 25% paid for by the riders, the fare box, and 75% subsidized by some other mechanism. Okay, it is materially different than a road. The major cost of transit is the transit operators and paying salary for operators. Our roads don't require operators to operate our roads. Our roads have to be maintained from a capital perspective. But there's something materially different in the cost to maintain transit, fixed guideway transit, than the cost of maintaining roads or maintaining road infrastructure. So when you talk about when you build a project, you've got a multi-year commitment to support it. It is something materially different with fixed guideway transit than anything we deal with in roads or bridges or other infrastructure. It's a multi-year commitment that can't be undone. You spend $1 billion on fixed guideway, it's too big to fail. It's something that's got to be supported perpetually at a very, very high level. That's really the concern.
Thank you for that discussion. Any other questions? I have one, but I will entertain others just for clarification for myself and maybe a couple other folks. The basis of the amendment, Mr. Chairman, boils down to if there is a proposed fixed guideway alignment project coming that runs through 3 counties, runs into 1, 2, or 3 counties, all the way through into them, that it only requires 1 county by referendum vote that does not approve it for the project not to move forward. Is that correct? If 1 out of the 3, or
for a county to have fixed guideway transit in it,
yes,
that county's voters have to approve it.
Gotcha. That's what I thought you said.
What's that? That's currently the law for MARTA. For example, if the counties that had the potential to opt into MARTA, it is currently the law for Cobb County, for example. If Cobb wanted to opt into MARTA, the Cobb voters would have to opt to put us in MARTA. So this simply recognizes that if we want to run something that's not MARTA, but just like it in essence, there ought to be a referendum vote of the people.
Thank you, Setzler. Excuse me, Chairman Setzler. I was entertaining 2 voices at one time there. Representative Gardner, I knew you would come around and have that question.
Well, I'm trying to understand what you're trying to do and what there is in this version of House Bill 70 that makes this necessary.
Okay. The transportation purposes defined in this bill that we're raising money for are very broad. I'm friendly to them being very broad. I think we ought to have broad transportation purposes. Historically, as a state, most of the funds that have gone to transportation have been collected as a motor fuel tax. Those are limited only to roads and bridges. We're talking about levying big dollars here for broad transportation purposes. Okay. So, likewise, since we're providing an enormous amount of money for broad transportation purposes, it's my belief that just like existing law requires any county to opt into MARTA, any county that's going to take MARTA-like service that's not part of MARTA with the MARTA penny, pursuant to the MARTA Act, something that mirrors it but it's not MARTA, ought to follow the same process.
Fine.
Another question?
I can already do that.
You have another question, Representative?
No, it just seems to me I can't understand why it's needed, but perhaps there's something I'm missing.
Well, Representative Garner, do you believe it's appropriate that before Gwinnett County, for example, were to opt into MARTA, do you think it's appropriate that that county get a vote, a referendum vote?
We're going to figure that out in just a second, whether she does or not. Chairman Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Sessler, I want to make sure I understand something here. I understand the desire for the voter referendum. Having worked on this bill as hard as many people have, here's my concern with this amendment, and you tell me whether I'm missing something or not. We've heard the author somewhat have to kind of say, trust me on transit, trust me on future public transportation. Could this amendment be seen as putting another obstacle in the way of being able to say, trust me, because we now have to go before the people on some of those things? I'm just trying, it's a friendly question. I'm just trying to understand, because I want a transportation bill passed. And I'm trying to just, to be real candid, weigh out what impact does this amendment have on the future viability of that. I just appreciate your opinion, and if not to put the author on the spot, but if he wants to weigh in on that, I would appreciate that. I understand. I think your motives are pure, and understand what you're trying to protect the taxpayers. But that just be very candid. That's what's one of the concerns I have.
I can concede to the author to speak first, but to answer your question directly, I've long said that I believe DeKalb, Fulton, City of Atlanta, Clayton, as they've expanded into MARTA, the rest of Georgia ought not stop those counties that have already adopted fixed guideway transit from getting it and expanding it. I think we should continue to be friendly to that. That's why it's drafted as it is. This applies to the 156 counties that are not those 3 counties. Those 3 counties can, and I would hope that as we bond for transit, they would be at the top of the list because they've already made the commitment. They've got a penny they levy just for MARTA. They've got the population density to support it. They've got the public support behind it. It's the perfect place for us to direct our first transit dollars. Also, as we talk about non-fixed guideway transit bus systems and paratransit, I would hope that all of our communities get to enjoy that. But to in essence make new counties MARTA-like counties, I simply think their voters ought to be able to speak and be heard in doing that. So I think to Representative Gardner's concern, I'm hopeful that her counties will get the lion's share of that transit funding that we're talking about. This just recognizes that a step for a county to take on the permanent commitment to annually support transit, it raises it to the level of a referendum. But that's all I'm doing.
I have questions on the amendment, but in deference to the chairman, we're going to move forward with the consideration of this amendment.
And, Mr. Chairman, if there's any specifics, we crafted this very, very carefully, so I'd be glad to speak to any questions pending time.
I think we vetted it pretty well. I don't see any other questions. Now we have the Setzler amendment before us. That is AM 340671, and I would open the floor for a motion on AM 340671. We have a move. Do I have a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the Setzler amendment, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. Noes clearly have it. Thank you. We appreciate the effort. Now, I think Representative Waits at 13 is going to propose another amendment for us.
Yes, sir.
Representative Waits.
Yes, sir. It's going to propose amending LC 344519S by inserting on line 317, page 10.
We do not have this amendment in front of us in the written form, but I'm going to hear her amendment.
Please.
And we're going to hear some comments on it, on where it may be addressed. I think it's important that we hear it. So we're going to hear it, and then Chairman will make a decision if we move forward on it.
I appreciate that, sir. The amendment would simply read that any bid for transportation purposes as defined in subsection B of Code Section 48-8-102, where the cost exceeds $100 million, shall identify within the bid a minority business participation plan that will be included in the evaluation and/or scoring system when awarding such bid. The next part of that would read, before a bid is awarded to an out-of-state contractor, that a minority or disadvantaged business owner be identified and given priority in such scoring and evaluation process. That concludes the amendment.
Thank you, Representative. I'm going to ask, I think there's some language already present, Representative and members of the committee. I'm going to ask Josh Waller from the department to come up and give some clarification on what may be already in statute on this particular issue. Josh?
I'm Josh Waller of Georgia DOT, and we appreciate the amendment. However, there would be a couple of concerns, but one of the key things to let you go know what we do have. Currently, we have an EEO director who reports directly to the commissioner. The board has approved a 15% goal for DBE, which is disadvantaged business enterprises. So we have that in place. We have to be very careful, though, with respect to procurement when you talk about out-of-state. We are not allowed to, under federal law, discriminate against out-of-state business. You also run into the issue of if you do create set-asides for in-state, you run issues of reciprocity with other states. So by that, the other states might respond in kind to make it more difficult for businesses from Georgia to compete. So it's one of those areas where we would have some concerns. But to your concern, with all of our projects, we have that 15%. What our EEO director does is works with all of our offices to identify the projects to help make sure that we're reaching that goal of 15% participation.
Mr. Chairman, I will withdraw the second portion of that and maintain the first section, which simply would read that we would identify within the bidding process a minority business plan to be included in the scoring and evaluation system.
Re-comment on that again and make sure I'm clear on what you said and what she said.
Well, I think we already have, in terms of our process, rather than a specific project by project, we have the EEO director who goes and identifies the best projects to meet that percentage, and that is what she does day in and day out, and she does an incredible job in doing so. Reports directly to the commissioner. So I think the challenge is not having that language directly in front of me as that would read would be if we say it's a mandate on an individual project. Where we would always be concerned is if, let's say, we've met the goal or we've got it identified somewhere else, we would not want to inadvertently have something hold up a project. And that's.
Thank you, Josh. Stay there just for a moment. We may need you back for further clarification. I'm going to ask any of the members if they have a question now on the amendment as stated and as discussion has taken place. Representative Williams.
Clarification, Mr. Chairman. As we vote today and on Representative Waits's amendment, will there be an opportunity for further discussion as we're able to get together with DOT and some others and try and see what we can come up with to try and make it clearer, more specific? Will there be that opportunity, Mr. Chairman, at some other time?
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking to the other chairman.
I'm talking to both of you because I want you.
I think the answer is Representative Williams and Representative Waits. Certainly, the department has always been very sensitive to this issue, as we have on this committee and as a body. And I believe, in all deference, if we could, I think the chairman has demonstrated an ability and a willingness to work with us on all issues and all parts of this legislation. I think at this point in time, this chair would ask that we put this on hold, see if we can work with the chairman in the next few days as this legislation moves through the process, and maybe we can come up with an answer that is acceptable. Would you be willing to accept that?
I'm happy to do so. Thank you.
But thank you for bringing this issue, and thank you, Josh.
Just say one more thing to that point.
Sure.
We unequivocally would want to work together on this, anywhere where we can identify some common ground that work, but beyond the legislative process, for everyone to understand that our door is absolutely 100% always open to discuss this and look at the plan, talk about the 15% goal, and how we, and so that's just, please contact us.
You can do that. Having been associated with DOT in a past life, Josh, I think that you do an absolutely marvelous job of covering all the people in Georgia that do work for tax dollars and revenue that we collect and then spend on our roads and bridges. So appreciate the policy and look forward to working and addressing further concerns. So thank you. Representative Nimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Friendly amendment here to the original substitute bill that we're working off of, HB 170 LC 344519S. On page 8, beginning on lines 249 to 253, I'd like to propose striking that language in that section. And then the exact same language appears again on the next page, lines 272 to 275. Would like to offer to strike that language there as well. Reason for this would be the tax currently in the way it's spelled out there in 251 goes out to June 30th of 2020, and we're moving the rate up by 0.25%. We wouldn't want to keep the tax on motor fuels and raise the rate. So I want to strike those two sections and clarify that.
Questions for Floor Leader Nimmer?
Yes, ma'am. Representative Gardner, page 8, line 249 to 253, and on page 9, lines 272 to 275. Did everybody get it?
Is everyone clear?
And renumber. Thank you.
Okay.
Legislative Council.
Legislative Council, you can add to this discussion, I think.
I'd just like to add to the amendment, and the intention is to stop those taxes from being levied on motor fuel as of July 1, 2015. That in addition to striking the lines that we've mentioned, we should go down to line 256, make it perfectly clear that saying on or after July 1, 2015, such joint sales in each section not be levied on motor fuels or diesel.
Motor fuels or diesel.
I'm right, Mr. Chairman. I think that gets us where we want to be on that.
Correct.
Thank you, Council.
Okay.
That's why you're here.
That's it.
Do we also need to change that on 277 as well?
Everybody get that ad from Lay Council on lines 256 and lines 277.
Can everyone hear that? Is everybody clear on the language? This is going to be an informal amendment. We're going to take some questions now.
Okay.
Yes. He's proposing, let's get our posture straight. Those changes are offered in the form of an amendment, and we'll take action up or down on that after some discussion. Representative Setzler. Representative Waits, I still have you blinking. Do you have a question on this? Operator error up here, I think that's what they call that. Representative Diffenbaugh.
Thank you, Chairman. With the amendment that's offered, I'm hearing two almost, at least in my mind, to delete those lines, and now getting from council the fact that if we just add that half of the sentence, that is this the same thing?
No, you've got to delete those lines and then add that in there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification there, Representative and Mr. Chairman. Other questions? Representative Nimmer, we have your amendment before us, and we will accept a motion on Representative Nimmer's amendment at this time. I have a motion and a second, and it do pass, and we will let all of those in favor of the floor leader's amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. You finally got a good one here, brother. It took you a while.
No, Chairman Roberts needs some help.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Are there other amendments or any final questions before we put this substitute? Here we go. Chairman McCall.
I just want to get it clear in my mind that ACCG, School Board Association, School Superintendent Association, all are okay with this whole bill. GMA too.
I can't tell you that they're all okay with it or not. I can tell you that we've addressed a lot of their concerns, but I can't tell you that they have all come out and endorsed this bill. I can't say that. I can say that they have. We've had some discussions with them about it, so they're aware, and we've addressed some of their concerns.
There's just some big old discrepancies between metro and rural.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chairman McCall. We always appreciate your words of wisdom, and I would echo Chairman Roberts' we always do. Especially if you're in the same suite he is, you certainly welcome his words of wisdom. I think Chairman Roberts certainly phrased it appropriately. He's reached out and been inclusive of not only these groups you mentioned, but of many people. These are most important folks that represent some of our constituents back home, and they're important to us. They're important to this legislation that should be and will be good for the people of Georgia. So I appreciate your concern, and I'm sure that that some of the folks you just mentioned will certainly meet you as soon as we adjourn this meeting to make sure that you know exactly how they feel about this legislation. At this point in time, we're in the posture of adopting. Excuse me. We'll be open for that now. Floor Leader Nimmer.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate it. To Chairman Roberts, I was told one time that emotion is always the enemy of statesmanship, and I believe it. Many people in the General Assembly's emotion would have ran them away from this issue long ago. And I appreciate you being a true statesman. I believe in your 13th or 14th year up here at the General Assembly. 13th year. That didn't come by accident. I commend the people of Osceola and your district for sending you up here, and I appreciate, as well as the rest of this committee, your efforts and leadership in this and not following what most men's emotions would have had them do, but standing firm and being a true statesman.
Thank you.
So I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. One more time. Let's see. Chairman Setzler.
I'll keep it short. I've taken enough of the committee already, but I will say that folks need to understand that transportation purposes is broad. It does bring into SPLOST lists things that we've not executed under SPLOST before, and that breadth concerns me. I laud the chairman for his endurance. He's been in at 6 a.m. in the morning and stayed late. I've just seen that, so I've wanted to respect him for his openness and his candor with people. But I do want to express concerns, really consistent with the amendment they offered, and I do have some concerns on that front. There are other concerns, but on that front, I do think we're broadening transportation purposes in a very significant way that I want to make sure members understand.
Chairman Setzler, we always appreciate your insight, and I truly mean that. And thank you for carrying and being an active part of these discussions. Thank you, and being very proactive, I would say. Thank you. At this point in time, we will consider the substitute to House Bill 170, which is LC 344519S, as amended by the Nimmer amendment, and we will have a show of hands as to the support for this bill. So at this point in time, I'll ask all of those in favor of moving. Oh, excuse me. I was on a roll. Well, I guess we do. I'll stand corrected. The bill as amended that I just went through, I won't go through again. I'll ask for a motion then on the substitute and the amendment, the Nimmer amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I would move due pass for LC 344519S as amended by Mr. Nimmer.
We have a due pass motion. Do I hear a second? Now, thank you. I was getting a little ahead of myself there. It's time to move on. I would ask all those in favor to let it be known by raising your right hand, and we'll take a count. Thank you. All opposed, same sign. We will report this bill out with a due pass recommendation from the full Transportation Committee. It's been an arduous process. It's still a process, I think, as you have said, Chairman Roberts. We appreciate all of those that have had a hand in crafting this legislation, and we look forward to moving it on out. Thank you, members, for being here. We stand adjourned. I did. I did.
That was.